Hey everyone, welcome back to Genai's FOSS News. I'm Genai, and we have a packed episode for you today. Linux kernel 7.0 just landed with some serious hardware love. France is making a historic break from Windows. The Linux kernel has a brand new official stance on AI-generated code. Microsoft is giving away a top-ranked AI model for free. And India just hit a massive open-source milestone. All that and more. Let's get into it. All right. Let's kick things off with the biggest headline of the week. Linux kernel 7.0 is officially out. As reported by its FOSS News, this is a landmark release packed with improvements across the board for Intel, AMD, and storage systems. So what's new? On the Intel side, there's fresh audio support for Nova Lake platforms. That's Intel's upcoming architecture, meaning better out-of-the-box hardware compatibility coming down the pipeline. For AMD fans, this release includes early preparation work for Zen 6, AMD's next-generation processor architecture. It's not full Zen 6 support yet, but the groundwork is being laid right now inside the kernel. On the storage front, its FOSS News highlights one particularly cool feature. XFS, the popular Linux file system, now has autonomous repair capabilities. That means the file system can detect and fix certain errors on its own without you having to unmount it or run manual checks. That's a big deal for server reliability. This release also continues the kernel's strong momentum in supporting modern hardware faster and more completely than ever. If you're running a desktop, server, or embedded system on Linux, kernel 7.0 is shaping up to be one of the most impactful releases in recent memory. Time to check if your distro has the update ready. Now, this is a story that the open source community has been dreaming about for decades. According to Open Source for You, France has formally launched one of Europe's most significant government open-source migrations ever. France's Interministerial Directorate for Digital Affairs, known as DINAM, has officially begun transitioning away from Microsoft Windows and replacing it with Linux across government departments. But it doesn't stop there. The migration also covers communications tools, productivity software, and cloud infrastructure, all being shifted toward open-source alternatives. Why is France doing this? The driving motivations are crystal clear: reducing dependency on US-based technology vendors and strengthening what they're calling digital sovereignty. Basically, France wants to control its own digital destiny rather than relying on foreign corporations for critical government infrastructure. This is a massive move. Government-scale Linux deployments at this level send a powerful signal to the rest of the world and to other European nations watching closely. We've seen smaller FOSS migrations in governments before, but the scale and official commitment from France here is something else entirely. If this succeeds, and there's every reason to believe it can, it could become the blueprint other countries follow. The open source world is watching Paris very closely right now. Here's a story that touches on something the entire developer community has been debating. Can AI-generated code make it into the Linux kernel? Well, now we have an official answer. Its FOSS News is reporting that the Linux kernel maintainers have formalized their policy on AI-assisted code contributions. And the short version is, yes, AI-assisted patches can be accepted, but with strings attached. So what are those conditions? While the full details are still being absorbed by the community, the core principle is that contributors must be transparent about AI involvement in their patches, and human review and accountability remain non-negotiable. You can't just fire up an AI, copy its output, and submit it. The submitting developer is still fully responsible for the correctness, security, and quality of every line of code. This is actually a pretty nuanced and thoughtful stance. The kernel maintainers aren't banning AI tools outright. That would be unrealistic in 2026, but they're making sure that the legendary quality standards of the Linux kernel don't get eroded by low-effort, AI-generated submissions slipping through the cracks. Given how central Linux is to everything from Android phones to cloud servers to supercomputers, getting this policy right really matters. It sets a precedent that other major open-source projects will almost certainly look to as they craft their own AI contribution guidelines. Here's one that might surprise you. Microsoft is actually giving something away for free, and it's genuinely impressive. Open Source for You reports that Microsoft's Bing team has open-sourced a family of AI embedding models called Harrier, releasing them under the MIT license. Now, for those not deep in the AI world, Embedding models are the backbone of search, recommendation systems, and retrieval-augmented generation. Basically, they're how AI systems understand relationships between words and concepts. Here's the kicker. Harrier isn't just another open-source model release for good PR. According to Open Source for You, it's actually the first open-source embedding family to top the multilingual MTEB v2 leaderboard. That's a widely respected benchmark for evaluating these kinds of models. It's beating closed, proprietary rivals from other AI companies. And with the MIT license, there are zero usage restrictions. Enterprises can use it commercially, modify it, integrate it into their products, no strings attached. This is a genuinely big deal for the open-source AI ecosystem. Having a best-in-class embedding model freely available means smaller companies, researchers, and developers around the world can build powerful AI search and retrieval systems without paying for expensive closed APIs. The open-source AI movement is gaining serious ground. Got an AMD GPU running on Linux? This one's for you. Its FOSS News reports that an open-source developer has put together a meaningful fix for a long-standing headache: VRAM mismanagement on AMD GPUs under Linux. This is the kind of issue that causes games, compute workloads, and GPU-intensive applications to crash or underperform because the GPU driver isn't managing video memory efficiently. The fix involves 6 kernel patches and 2 separate utility tools. Together, they address how the AMD GPU driver tracks and reclaims VRAM, leading to noticeably better behavior in real-world usage scenarios. This is exactly the kind of community-driven improvement that makes Linux great. One developer identified a problem, did the deep technical work, and shipped a solution. No waiting for a corporate roadmap, no quarterly update cycle. Just open source doing what it does best. The patches are currently in the process of being reviewed for upstream inclusion, which means they could land in a future kernel release and benefit all AMD GPU users on Linux automatically. If you're gaming on Linux or running GPU compute workloads with AMD hardware, this is very good news. This next story is about a country that is absolutely dominating the global open source scene right now. According to Open Source for You, India has officially crossed 27 million developers on GitHub, making it the world's largest and fastest-growing open-source contributor base on the platform. Let that number sink in, 27 million developers. But it's not just raw numbers. Open Source for You notes that India's developer community is increasingly influential in open-source AI projects and globally adopted developer technologies. This isn't a passive user base. Indian developers are actively shaping the tools and frameworks the entire world relies on. This milestone is a powerful signal about where global software development is heading. India's investment in technical education, its massive young population entering the workforce, and a strong culture of open-source contribution are all compounding to create one of the most dynamic developer ecosystems on the planet. For the broader FOSS community, more contributors means more perspectives, more innovation, and faster development of the tools we all use. This is genuinely great news for open source everywhere. Staying in India for one more story, this one is genuinely historic. Open Source for You reports that Andhra Pradesh is unveiling India's first indigenous, open-access quantum computing testbeds, dedicated by Chief Minister N. Chandrababu Naidu. The significance here is twofold. First, this is hardware built domestically in India, not imported. Second, and this is the part that matters most to the FOSS community, it's open access. That means researchers, students, and startups can get direct access to real quantum hardware to experiment, learn, and build on. This isn't a closed research lab that only a handful of insiders can touch. It's designed to build a domestic ecosystem around quantum validation, skilling, and manufacturing. Open access quantum hardware is still extremely rare globally. The fact that India is not only building its own quantum systems, but making them publicly accessible is a massive leap. It positions India as a serious player in the quantum computing race while staying true to open access principles that the FOSS community champions. If you're a researcher or a student in India interested in quantum computing, your access just got a whole lot more real. And that's a wrap on this week's Genai FOSS news. What a week it's been. A milestone Linux kernel release, France going all in on open source, AI entering the kernel with guardrails, Microsoft dropping a free best-in-class AI model, and India making waves on both GitHub and quantum computing. Open source is absolutely thriving. If you found this useful, do us a solid and hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Subscribe if you haven't already so you never miss an episode, and drop a comment below telling me which story got you most excited this week. I'm personally betting France's Linux migration is going to be the one everyone's talking about for months to come. Until next time, keep it open, keep it free. See you in the next one.